Hey guys, it's Chloe. Welcome back or welcome to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be doing a little bit of DIY. If you are somebody who wants to install an aftermarket accessory on your Tacoma, like maybe you want to install some ditch lights or a light bar, or it doesn't have to be lights, maybe you want to do an extra camera, whatever it may be, and basically you want the control for that accessory to be a nice OEM looking switch that mounts seamlessly into your truck, that's got a nice OEM finish and doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. I think this might be the video just for you. One of my things with my own Tacoma is that even if I install an aftermarket accessory, I want things to fit in seamlessly. So after a few years of trial and error going through several different products, I think I have finally come up with a solution to integrate those switches for your accessories that will help maintain that original look and won't require any trimming or cutting. So this video is going to be a walkthrough and guide on how I wired up different aftermarket accessories like the cube lights in my bumper, a front camera, an air compressor. I'm going to be sharing the products that made this look possible, as well as showing you guys how to do some of the wiring. So hopefully this will be simple enough to follow along if you're looking to do something similar in your own Tacoma. So really from inside the cab, there are two products that make this setup have this factory appearance that I've been talking about. The first would be this replacement base switch panel by Guild Outfitters. Now the purpose of getting this switch panel is that it replaces your factory OEM one. And that is because as you're adding accessories, you're going to need spots to add switches. At least for me, my OEM one only came with a single blank and I knew I was gonna need more room. So a switch panel like this can accommodate that setup for more switches while also keeping my factory or all my existing switches that came on my truck here in this location as well. So the finish is a nice, slightly textured matte black. It's definitely not the same finish as the OEM one, but it still matches the rest of the interior really, really well. It's very easy to install, and in fact, with every base switch panel, Guild Outfitters provides a plastic pry tool so you can remove your old one and install your new one. It really is as simple as popping out the old panel, transferring all your switches, and then putting the new panel in. Now there are quite a few aftermarket replacement switch panels that can add more switches in your truck, but this particular one from Guild Outfitters is the one I'm sticking with on my truck for a couple different reasons. I have tried others, as you might have seen in my previous videos. Some of the other ones have just really, really tight tolerances and are just really hard to snap in, and actually have scratched up my truck a tiny, tiny bit, not anywhere where you can really notice. I mean, once they're in, they really stay in, but they are a little bit tight, and with the Guild one, I haven't had any of those issues. It's a nice tight fit, but not too tight, which means it's also easy to take out when you want to add extra switches. With a lot of other aftermarket ones as well, you might have to do some cutting in order to get them to fit. That is not the case with this Guild one. And then also, I was running one from Miso Customs that I honestly really, really liked. I love all Miso products, but the ones they sell are basically in like a static configuration. So you have to know beforehand what your setup is going to be, where you want your switches, which for me was fine, but I would like something a little bit more modular, and that's where this Guild one I think is a little bit superior. All the Guild Outfitters ones come with this big cutout, and that's where you can add these modular inserts. And all these inserts have different switch configurations, so if you ever needed to change it up, add more switches, remove something, change out one of your shorter switches for a taller one, you don't have to buy the whole new panel. You can just buy the modular insert that fits for you. I also believe they make an insert that allows you to fit a Switch Pros, which I know a lot of you guys run. And I think the actual base panel itself fits one of those aux beam controllers already as is. So for all those reasons, I really recommend this Guild Outfitter switch panel if you're planning on running a setup kind of like mine. The next product or products you would need to achieve this factory appearance are OEM style switches. Now I get all of mine from Cali Ray's LED. The finish is this matte black ABS, which is the same as all of the existing factory switches, so it matches really well. When you also press them, they have this blue backlighting which matches the other factory switches too. And I like Cali Ray's LED because they sell a lot of different switches, so you can get ones that say light bar, ditch lights, and then also if you notice in your Tacoma, most of your switch sizes come in either this short or tall style, and all the switches that Cali Ray's LED come in both of those styles, so it should accommodate your setup. They also all come with a connector and wires, and next I'm going to show you how to actually wire them up. But yeah, basically the two things that make this OEM look possible are those OEM style switches and this switch panel. So the actual mounting of a switch like this along with the panel itself is pretty simple, but the slightly more challenging part is the wiring, because when you've got a switch like this, you do not want to wire this directly to your lights or whatever accessory you're running. And the reason for that is because these switches aren't rated for enough amperage that your accessory draws, which means you can easily overheat these things and burn up your wires and potentially start a fire in your truck. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to add in a relay switch, which if you don't know, this is just an electrical switch that lets a low current circuit control a high current circuit like your lights or air compressor. So with that being said, now I'm going to show you how to make a wiring harness that will allow you to connect your dash switch to your accessory using a relay. Now sometimes your accessory will already come with a wiring harness that has a dash switch and relay. That's all I'm really showing how to make in this section of the video. A lot of times when you pick these custom switches, you'll have to do some of the wiring yourself. Before I get started, I just wanted to say, please modify your truck really at your own risk. I'm just sharing what I did and what worked for me, but I am by no means an electrician or mechanic. Wiring can be really dangerous, so always take your time and take caution when you're doing something like this. It's a good idea to do things like disconnect your battery before you start working. Okay, so now let's assume you have your accessory mounted in place with a power and ground wire coming out. To start on the wiring, what you'll need is a relay, as I just mentioned. Now, there are many types of relays. On my right, I have a double throw, which has 5 terminals, and on my left, I have a single throw, which has 4. For the purposes of this video, I'm keeping it simple, so when it comes to controlling like a single light bar or something upon pressing your in-cab switch, you can use a single throw. The extra terminal on the double throw 87A is the normally closed output, so you could do more research on that if that's something you think you want to use in your setup, but I won't get into the details of it. I'm just going to be using my single throw. Another thing you'll need is an ADA circuit. Now, this is what's going to connect to the source on your switch. This is how you can get your in-cab switch to turn on your accessory when only your lights are on, for example, or if your truck is only in accessory mode. It all just depends what you tap into. And for the Tacoma, the one I'm showing you here will work, but I find that getting the low profile mini type is actually the best because the Tacoma fuses are mostly low profile minis. Then for the switch that goes into the cab, you'll probably get a wiring harness that looks just like this, and you can see it plugs right into the back of the switch, and there are 4 wires that come out. We are going to be ignoring one of the wires because one of them is kind of optional. It's just for the switch backlighting. There are a lot of other things that you may or may not need depending on your setup. Sometimes you find you need something as you go, which always sucks if you don't have it, but throughout this demo you'll see some of the typical things that I end up just keeping stocked in my garage in case I need them. But I will say a good tool that can strip, cut, and crimp wires is great, like this one from Boxo Tools. And then for wire, I like to buy a lot of copper stranded for corrosion resistance, but do make sure you pick the correct gauge. You can use online charts that do the calculations for you, which is what I typically do. Okay, so now let's build the harness. I'm going to be doing this outside of my truck purely just for demonstration purposes, so it's easier to present to you guys. So my wire isn't going to be cut to length, and technically this harness won't be complete, but it will give you a good idea of what you need to wire up, what goes where, what connects to what, how I personally like to splice and crimp all of my wires, just stuff like that. What I'm doing first is using a pre-wired relay socket and labeling all of the relay terminals, even though the wires are all different colors because it's just easier for me to see. I also highly recommend just drawing up a diagram that you can follow prior to starting. That's typically what you see me do in my own videos. So for the connections, you're going to connect 85 to chassis ground, which means that you have to slightly extend this wire probably. So what I like to do is use a butt connector like these. Basically, you just crimp using the right tool, which should be color coded to the butt connector. And then my favorite thing personally about these butt connectors, sorry, I'm gonna nerd out here a little bit guys, is that you can use a heat gun and they become insulated and waterproof. So satisfying to me. So that's what I'll typically do if I need to splice two wires together. And then lastly at the end here, I'm adding a ring terminal because typically I will ground with some bolt connected to the chassis. So a ring terminal is just what I would use for that. Again, all for demo though, but that's 85, simple enough. Now for 86, this is going to get connected to a wire on the switch harness, particularly red 1 or the red wire closest to the green. So again, you can use butt connectors to extend out your wires and splice together what you need, use the heat gun, etc. And then your 86 connection is done. Now, out of the switch wiring harness, you do have to connect the green wire coming out of it to an ATA circuit. Typically, the ATA circuits will come with butt connectors at the end, which you can also just crimp. And then the ATA circuit can go in the fuse box inside your engine bay or fuse box inside your cab. My other install videos go into more detail on this, but you would just pick basically where you wanted to tap into and then put that factory fuse into your ATA circuit and then put your ATA circuit into the fuse slot. Back on the switch, the red wire or red 2 next to the black wire is that illumination wire I was talking about earlier. I'm not going to be showing it to you guys today. And then the black wire is another ground one. And then going back to the relay, the last two terminals, 87, which is the yellow wire, and 30, which is the blue. I'm not going to be showing you too much because 87 is what would go to your accessory, and then 30 connects to your 12-volt battery source. But when you connect that up, make sure you add an inline fuse. And later you'll see my setup has a breaker, but regardless, you should put something between the battery and there for protection. And that's all of the general steps of how to add a relay to your switch to get your accessory working. Now I realize this demo here is a little bit crude, but again, hopefully it's just something clear enough that you guys can follow along if needed. Now, what's the best way to manage or install all of this stuff on your Tacoma? I'm going to be showing you a few options I've done over the years on my own truck and talk about what I think.
So now with knowing how to wire a relay up, you can kind of understand or see how if you started to add more and more accessories, your wiring can get kind of messy just because you would have like so many relays. So depending on your setup, I have a couple of different recommendations. If you plan on adding just 1 or 2 accessories, Cali Raised LED sells a bolt-on relay holder that really is just helpful for organizing. That is my first recommendation just because it's the easiest. But if you plan on adding more, not only are you going to have more relays, but you're also going to have more fuses. You're going to start to have more connections to your battery, which is why a lot of people like me will centralize all of their wiring with a setup that has a fuse block.
Essentially, the benefit of something like that is that you only have one wire running to your battery that you definitely want to have an inline fuse for, but you basically just connect that to your fuse block, and then there's all these different slots for different relays and fuses for all of your different accessories. Now, I've gone through two different setups. The first one being this mount from a company called Overland Equipped. It basically allows you to either add a 6 or 12 Blue Sea fuse block, and it also had a cutout for the inline fuse I was talking about that goes to your battery. It was nice and simple, pretty easy to do, but the only thing was there wasn't too much real estate for my actual relays themselves. If you do want to go that route, I have a video of myself installing the whole thing that I'll have linked down below. The only thing I recommend in addition to that is adding the CaliRays LED relay holder. But now my newest setup is actually from a subscriber who makes these 3D printed brackets that will allow you to mount this specific relay and fuse box that you can get from Amazon. And while I will say that with this specific box, you do have to make up all the wiring yourself, like you've got to splice and crimp, which is something you don't have to do if you buy the Blue Sea fuse block. This setup is waterproof, and also it gives a little bit more of that OEM factory seamless appearance, at least here under the hood. Okay, so that is all I have for today's video. I hope you guys found this helpful, and if any of you out there have any other tips or products you'd like to achieve something like this in your own Tacoma, please leave a comment down below. And again, if you're going to be doing any sort of wiring in your truck, just be careful and just use common sense when you're going to do something like this. So that is it for this video. If you want more content and want to connect with me more, you can follow me on my Instagram at ChloeKuo Taco. Otherwise, I hope I will see you in the next video. Bye guys.